Hi, this is Henrik Fisker. This is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
Now, Henrik, it's always good to see you and to be with you. It's been a little while. Auto shows have precluded us from bumping into each other in the usual places, but I'll start off by asking how you're doing.
I'm doing great, actually. I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking.
You made a lot of news at the end of last year with just a little reveal that attracted a lot of attention and a lot of momentum behind that. It must have felt good for you to be back in the game front and center and introducing new product. I know how much you love product. We're going to get into a lot of your product choices and where your mind is on design. But tell me about that moment just at the end of last year around LA.
No, it was sort of a double fun thing because on one hand, of course, we were excited to show a final production design of the Fisker Ocean. And on the other hand, it was also sort of the first time that I got out and actually see some real metal, if you want, and go to our car show. There's nothing like seeing a car in reality. You can sit and look at the screen, as we have for the last 2 years, but eventually there's just nothing like seeing a car in reality. So I loved being at the LA Auto Show, showing the vehicle and also just seeing people were super excited about it.
Yeah, you must have been happy with the reception that you got. There was certainly a lot of reception around it, and I think a lot of excitement. And I know how much planning goes into something like that. Kind of take me back to your own emotions of just preparing for that moment and to unveil the ocean to the world.
When you show a vehicle that is about a year before you start deliveries, you're always scrambling to get the last perfect up-to-date production parts into the vehicle, or at least production intent parts. So that's stressful because essentially if you were ready, you would start delivering next week, but you're not, you're still a year out. So that was definitely a lot of hard work, a lot of late nights from the entire team at Fisker. We're still a relatively small company, but it was a really unique moment because I think it's the first time in my career that I've shown a production car where I actually would say it got better from the show car, and that's very rare. It usually goes the other way around. You always
why is that? Yeah, because we see these concept cars, and they're these striking designs at auto shows, and you always wonder, well, why is it that the production version delivered about 50% of the promise?
Well, traditional car companies, or actually I'll probably say all car companies in the world, usually starts with, the engineering department and marketing department have decided on a certain vehicle category, and then the designers get given a sort of layout that they have to work towards. And sometimes the management comes to design just before they get that layout and say, hey, what do you think this should look like? Just make a show car. Then they make a show car, and then finally they're given this package and they all go, oh shit, we can't actually really do that. The wheels are way too big, the track is too wide, the car is too low, we're gonna have to adjust it. And that's usually why you get disappointed. In our case, we obviously a design-led company, and we started out with a show car that somewhat were constrained a bit. We were working on a certain package. And as we then moved the program into production, we took ourselves some more freedom and actually did a few things that had constrained us a bit. We widened the track a bit. We put slightly larger wheels on. We got a lot more sculptural in the body. And we redesigned the interior with a screen technology that wasn't even available to us at the time. So, technology moves so fast that it was almost an advantage for us to compress the actual development of this car into a super short time frame, and thereby getting more new technology into the car. So it benefited us, which is kind of cool. And that's what I was really excited about.
You had enormous interest right out of the gate. I think you had nearly 20,000 reservations before you even showed the vehicle. Give us a little update on where we are right now in terms of production and when we expect to see the 2023 Fisker Ocean SUV.
So we have actually, first of all, the orders have accelerated, which is great. So we are just getting a ton of orders in every day on the vehicle, which is really cool. And people are starting to see the advantages of this vehicle, all the features we have, nobody else have, et cetera. And I think it all surprised the people or the customers and reservation holders and those who put reservation down that we have the longest range in our price segment, up to 350 miles. So that's quite cool. But in terms of production, yeah, it's been really tough during COVID with chip shortages, supply chain issues, to actually manage that whole, complex, I would say, development. And we have been able to do it so far. I think we have an excellent team. We have some really good partners in this program, some really good suppliers. And for some reason, we have been able to solve every issue we have had. So therefore, we are still on target to start our deliveries in November this year, both in the US and a few select countries in Europe.
When you look at the landscape of where the auto industry is today, it is littered with upstarts. These folks who truly believe that that theirs is the next model that will take over, that they have a better distribution system, perhaps, that they have that they will have more range. In some cases, they're backed by enormous money, capital that's coming out of the markets. You must look at this, given your experience at some major automakers, many which we're going to talk about here soon, that this is a revolutionary time for the auto industry, perhaps propelled, if you will, by new propulsion, and that's what's making this all seem very doable for those startup companies. Give me your view on the auto industry today, given your track record, your long track record in it.
Well, first of all, the auto industry is one of the most underestimated industries in the world in terms of complexity and cost, in terms of, what is the price of entry? And it's, minimum $1 billion just to get anything done. So with that said, though, I think something happened in 2020 as COVID came out. And there was a multiple of factors. One was we had seen, despite doomsday scenario every year for Tesla, they did quite well and accelerated, and they became leaders in their segment by far. We saw people starting to be more interested in sustainability and a clean planet, and starting to buy more sustainable products. We saw people like myself, for example, buying for the first time a pair of shoes online, which I probably would have sworn I would never have done, but I did it just because you're sitting at home in COVID. So you saw that whole transition to this digital environment, new technology, people getting out of their old habits. And there was then that final moment, which was maybe the most important reason for this kind of march of all these new EV startups, and that was, quite frankly, cash. Wall Street had decided at one point in 2020 and coming in 2021 that they were believing in EVs are coming, and they're coming faster than they originally thought. And I think there was also a belief that the real disruptors in this segment was not going to come from traditional automotive industry, because they've shown they were too slow. And for good reasons. I mean, they have amazing systems that have spent 50 years perfecting, and it's not easy to get out of those and change everything around. So I think there was all this culmination of all these factors. And of course, not everybody will survive, and this industry is much harder than people think. And the interesting thing, maybe the most interesting thing of this industry and why it's so difficult, and we have seen it even with some of the biggest car companies in the world. First of all, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how good your distribution system is. It doesn't matter how good your design is. It doesn't matter how long range you have. It only matters if enough of those components are interesting enough for the consumer to want your product. It doesn't matter who you are, how big you are. And we have seen it again and again, that even large car makers can make a flop where no consumer want to buy it, even if they spend hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising. And so I think that's kind of what's exciting about this industry. And now, of course, there's another thing that got thrown in there, and that is electrification and the competition from the startups. And that's sort of put this turmoil in the automotive industry. And I expect when you look back in 5 or 10 years, you're going to see this moment as the most important moment ever for the automotive industry since we went from the horse to the car to the gasoline engine. And this is that next big step that is happening right now. And I would also say, I think if you aren't in right now and already involved, it's probably too late, because I think the moment was 2020 and 2021.
What did you learn that you've applied now from your bankruptcy situation?
So, when I started Fisker Automotive originally, there was only two companies that sort of dabbled in electric vehicles and sustainability and all these things, and tried to make their own cars, and that was Tesla and Fisker. And if you look back at the history at that time, it took both these companies many, many years, much more than we estimated. We had to go back out for money, et cetera, et cetera. It was super difficult. Nobody believed. A lot of suppliers wouldn't work with us. I mean, one of the reasons I think Tesla is so vertically integrated, because they just gave up and said, we're going to do it ourselves, right? So we made our own electric motors at the time, by the way. So, so it was a very unique era, and it's easy always to go back in hindsight, but I would say a couple of things I took with me, learning from this complexity of this industry, is supply chain is extremely important. You have to look at the risk with new technology, which is why we signed a major agreement with the largest battery maker in the world. Originally, when we did Fisker 1.0, we had, a startup that failed, so we couldn't continue. I wouldn't do that again today. And then finally, the money situation. We didn't have a choice at that time. We couldn't go out and raise $1 billion. That cash wasn't available, so we had to do multiple raises, and that's never a good idea. So when we went out this time in 2020 with Fisker Inc., we kind of said we don't really want to kick off this program until we have raised minimum $1 billion, which we did in 2020, and then we raised another about $600 million last year. So we have enough cash where we don't have to do the stop and go, where we can invest in the technology that we need and everything else. So that's kind of the lessons learned. I think we got a lot of investors in because they realized that they were not going to have to fund the typical mistakes that startups do, because we had already experienced them and we're not going to do them again.
You were too early, really. You talk about being too early at the time, which, for those who don't know, you were more than a year before the Tesla Model S launched when you came with the Fisker Karma. And you thought there must be a demand for a really cool, sexy, environmentally friendly car. Now, if that doesn't sound familiar, I don't know what does, right? Cool and sexy and has some environment. Okay, we're there now. But you had the most interesting features. Reclaimed wood from the California fires, a vegan interior, which you called eco chic, or even had a good name, Henrik. but as you said, that just went over everyone's head. So here you are now, and the whole world has gone electric. You must be, with money, with a lot of capital, you must be thinking, wow, if only I wasn't so early.
Yeah, that comes to mind. I mean, timing is everything, as they say, and we were too early. And, if you would be lucky and look at a Fisker Karma one day and it's original, you would find there's a certificate inside the glove compartment that actually shows that reclaimed wood. But, those are the things. We were super fanatic, enthusiastic group of people that really believed in it. And a lot of times when you're that enthusiastic and that strong a believer, you tend to sometimes develop things too fast. But, we took all these lessons learned and we applied it in today. And I think today is very relevant. And I think with a lot of these learnings, we can take a lead, specifically in sustainability. That's a passion of mine, to incorporate that into the automotive world, specifically because, I don't believe, and I don't want to ever have to only rely on public transportation. I love my personal mobility, and I believe the only way we can preserve that is if we make it sustainable and clean.
When you think about the lessons that you've now applied to where you are, is the biggest one the fact that you're not gambling on, mechanical challenges as you mentioned earlier, or are you also hoping that the public understands where you've been and that you're now applying those lessons to a future vehicle?
I don't think I don't think when I look at the people who's reserving our car, I don't think they look at doing it because where have I been? They want a good product, and that's the way you have to look at a business. When we looked at launching our first car on the Fisker Inc., I really just looked at the market and I saw a very clear trend that everybody's moving to us SUVs. Now, I would say a smart engineer would says, yeah, that's maybe true. But if you want to make the perfect electric vehicles, you got to make a hatchback because it's way more aerodynamically, correct. And therefore you can get a longer range. But my view was we got to follow what people like and then see how can we make this long range? What else can we do? I don't want to just do a jelly bean shape to get the range. I want to do a cool, sexy product, an SUV, and still get the range. And that was kind of a different direction that we took than anybody else out there, because everybody's doing sedans and hatchbacks and so on and fastbacks. That was number one. Number two was I've already done a ton of supercars and sports cars in my life, and they were all $100,000 plus. And the second challenge was, hey, why don't we make a sexy, cool car that starts under $40,000? And that was when everybody yelled and said it's impossible. So, going into that was a huge challenge. But I think that now that we showed the vehicle, we're firm on the pricing. In fact, I was just reading some comments. I think it was in Top Gear magazine where people are coming, that's never going to happen. And that price must be quoted wrong. And we're like, well, that is the price, So, I think that has struck a little bit of a chord with people too. Finally, there's a car I can afford that is cool and sexy and that I want, that is electric. And I think that's the opportunity we are seeing and that I'm seeing.
One more thing on the Fisker Karma, which I think was just gorgeous, by the way, but not gorgeous enough to have to sleep in it during the financial issues. You did that, right?
I did. It's actually not that bad. I don't want to do it again, though.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about your history. You were a car crazy kid. You've been fanatical your entire life about vehicles. And I think the story goes that you became interested in cars after seeing a Maserati Bora on the highway. Do you remember that moment, Henrik?
I totally remember it. I was sitting in the backseat of my dad's Saab 96, which were the sort of bubble-shaped Saabs back from the early 60s, I think. And, it was somewhere in the early 70s. And I remember the silver Maserati Bora just passing us. I was a little kid in Denmark, Scandinavia. And I just remember I got this butterflies in my stomach and I didn't know why. And I was just like, I got goosebumps. And I remember just thinking, I want to work in that industry. I didn't know what it was. And honestly, when I was trying to get into it, I remember writing a letter to Volvo when I was like 18 or something. And because there was no car design in Denmark. And I said, hey, I'll start anywhere. I'll sweep the floor. I just want to get in. And they said, no way. You have to go to a school first for car design. So they, advised Art Center College of Design in the US. Well, that's history. But I just remember that feeling of the butterflies. And I still think there's something about cars that are so emotional. I think it's maybe the element of the sculpture of that gigantic piece of metal or aluminum. And then I think it's the power that it's maybe one of the few things left that we give to everybody. They have to take a pretty simple driving test, and then you can take command of this incredible, dangerous machine, that they're in charge of, is theirs. And I think there's something unique about that because we don't really allow that anymore. And we've kind of left that in our society. And I'm happy we did that because we got to have some emotions in our society and a little bit of responsibility, even if it's dangerous.
How old were you when you saw that Bora?
I must have been around, I would say 8 or 9, something in that range, I would say.
And designing, what was your first professional sketch that you remember? What did you work on first?
Actually, I arrived at BMW in 1989, and I was so excited to design the next BMW 7 Series or 3 Series Coupe or whatever. And my first assignment, and I really hated it, was an electric car. Actually, I remember the chief designer said, Henrik, you're new and you're the only one working on this project. We really don't want to do it. But America, in California, they have made a law that by 1999, 10% of all cars in California have to be electric. So we got to do a show car. So I was assigned to that. And it was, of course, it was a lead acid batteries, 40-mile range, 40-mile top speed, little thing. And I was like, why do I have to do this? But I remember finishing it and I had my best suit on and I went to the Frankfurt Auto Show and I stood proudly beside it. And it was, of course, put all the way in the corner. And I remember nobody came by to take a look.
What an interesting story, and what a twist of fate too. And the electric designing an electric car at that time. I mean, what did you research the General Motors EV1 for guidance?
That was the only thing. And of course, that looked a bit like a blob. And of course, a BMW, we were like, this has to look like a BMW. So I did my best. We weren't thinking much about, the advances of electric at that time. It was more like designing a little cool BMW. And it wasn't that cool because it was too tall, too narrow. It had really funky proportions. But yeah, it's a little bit of coming back. It was sort of an interesting thing that was my first project.
Did it just go into the scrap heap following the Frankfurt show?
You'll hate to hear that, but it actually burned up in a fire at BMW at one point. So
how so?
That show car doesn't exist anymore. I think it was getting charged during the night. It burned up, and it doesn't exist. It was called the E1, so it doesn't exist anymore.
What a great story! You moved on, clearly. And one of the next vehicles that you were a part of, especially on the concept car side, was this little vehicle called the Z07. And for those who don't know, well, you tell the story.
Well, BMW had long time wanted to do some sort of top of the line car that sort of was the embody of all the BMW DNA, the ultimate driving machine, beautiful, all these things. And they kept looking over to Stuttgart where Mercedes had the SL, and they were really annoyed, but they didn't really want to do an SL because they kind of felt that's a certain Mercedes segment. So the assignment came sometime in summer. If somebody wanted to give it a shot, got a few engineers in the program, and nobody wanted to do it because it wasn't a real program. And I got to design it, or got the project, and I designed was the show car Z07. And when we showed it to the board, they were so excited that they said, you know what, let's just build it, which were kind of, I guess, those days where that was still possible. I don't know that it really happens in the car industry anymore, but we pretty much built that vehicle, which became, of course, the Z8 sports car, exactly the way I had designed it. There was no real changes to the vehicle. It was a big effort from engineering to do it. I have to say, it was incredible. There was just an enthusiastic team there that did it. And I think to this day, it's still quite iconic for BMW.
It's iconic, because that's the word I was going to use. I mean, it was only good enough for James Bond. You must have been completely thrilled at the success of it, of course, Hollywood's interest in it. Tell me about that, about designing a Bond car.
That was really cool. The producer or director or whatever wanted the car in the movie, although it was supposed to have been a different BMW, but he came by the design studio, saw it, and it was put in the movie. I was still a young designer, so I was not really allowed to know anything about what happened on the higher levels in the company, other than, hey, it's going in the Bond movie. And I was able to wiggle myself into the premiere of the film, but never knew exactly what's going to happen. And I had in my dreams that this car was going to escape some mean Ferraris and Lamborghinis, etc. And of course, in the film, it gets cut in half. And I have to say, I was devastated when I saw that. But I was happy. I got to I got to go to the Bond party afterward and saw some of the Bond girls. That made me happy.
The car that was cut in half. That's the outtake of that film. You left BMW, you went to Ford in 2001. You were design director at Aston Martin, and you were in charge of the production design of the beautiful DB9. And you brought in a lot of design elements from Aston Martin, and I think also being a part of the V8 Vantage had to be enormously gratifying for you. Tell me what that meant to be part of Aston Martin's lore.
Well, when I started at Ford, I think they'd just about acquired Aston Martin, and I know that there was definitely some passion from Ford. And I remember, I was doing two jobs at Ford. Actually, I was also in charge of their advanced design studio in Irvine, as well as sitting on the board of Aston Martin, the design director of Aston Martin. And I remember meeting Bill Ford at our design studio, and he was. He's, I think, really an interesting guy, and he really saw a cool car we were working on, but it wasn't really sort of, I think it was probably too advanced for Ford at the time. But there was definitely, I could feel there was a passion also from other board members at Ford. So when I got over to Aston Martin, it was funny because it was a little bit like, yes, we own Aston Martin, but we don't want to spend too much time on it because, really they only sell a couple of thousand cars a year. So when I arrived there, coming both from Ford and BMW, I was surprised about how small the team was and how they didn't have a lot of stuff. And I hadn't actually, to be honest, spent sort of my entire days in a while just sitting sketching vehicles because I was in charge of a big design studios and designers. But at Aston, I arrived and there was nobody there. So I had a grand title, but I was also the designer. And that kind of
Nobody there.
there was nobody there. I mean, there was nobody in design. So because they had outsourced it before that, and the former guy, Ian Callum, he had gone to Jaguar. So he was in charge of that. But it was kind of exciting because I got to kind of go back to my passion, which were designing cars. I remember sitting down, sketching the V8 Vantage, and it was an interesting program because at the time, I remember there was some long-term Aston Martin buyers that complained that we were even thinking about making an affordable Aston Martin. And I say affordable, as that was.
Sure.
But it was a big challenge because it was really the vehicle that had to revive Aston Martin. It was all or nothing, that vehicle. And it's funny because when I look at it afterwards, people are always asking if there was a lot of pressure. And I didn't really think much of it as a pressure other than, hey, I can do this car and there's really nothing sort of stopping me. We didn't have any big, focus groups or anything like that. So it became a very pure vehicle that turned out to, I think to this day, is the most sold Aston Martin ever. And I remember it was probably one of these vehicles where also because Aston Martin was so historic, I spent an extraordinary amount of time thinking about the brand and how to make the vehicle as timeless and as simple and as clean as possible. Maybe more than I've ever done to that point in my career. So there's definitely something special in the heart for me having done that car.
So let me ask some design and designer questions, if you will. Take off your current hat for a moment and let's just talk about good design. What is it that makes good design, in your opinion?
So, we're obviously a design-led company, and I think when you design a car, I mean, everybody today has got into, I think, let me back up a little bit. There was a fundamental change in the automotive industry that happened in the 70s. And the change was a lot of new legislation came in on safety, on fuel economy, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And at that point, the initiation of a car changed from coming from design and maybe some creative engineering into more of, hey, let's define a package and a segment and some targets of fuel economy and safety and everything else. So since the 70s, the way a car is designed is that designers get a package and saying, this is a segment we're in, here's the package. And that means your proportion are very defined early on. What I believe truly creates a great design is if you have freedom to organize the proportions from a design point of view. And that means what the wheelbase is, what the width is, what the wheel size is, how long the hood is, how fast the windscreen is, everything. And that is just very difficult for any car company to allow a designer to do because they have all these cars that they have to replace and they have all these segments they want to fulfill. At Fisker, we don't have that. And even with the Ocean, we were fine, like, I'm just going to make these proportions the way I think they're right. Of course, you still have to go in and make some compromises to fit people in this and that. But I think a great design ultimately starts with great proportions. And there's no formula for that, by the way, which is why you see, famous car companies failing with car designs, because there's really no formula for good design. But my belief is great proportions, number one. Then it's the sculpture. And I think the ability of the designer to remove design elements that are not needed. And I think a lot of designs have maybe too many design elements because everybody gets excited and also everybody wants some eye-catching stuff. And that eye-catching stuff gets old really quick. And it then means the design isn't really timeless, and isn't really going to become iconic. So I think that's an important part. And I think finally to understand how the graphics on the vehicle, meaning the DLO, as we call it, the daylight opening, which is the window area, how does that work with the size of the lamps? How does that work with the rest of the graphics, the lines on the vehicle? So there's a lot of things that goes into designing a vehicle, and there's also three-dimensional. And by the way, then you have to be able to open the doors. And by the way, then you have to be able to get in the vehicle. So as you move through this, it is an extremely complex process that there is no guarantee for success. I think there's a lot about gut feel. And that's why you see rather the rarity of an amazing design. It's not so often that you see that.
So what are some amazing designs that you admire in today's vehicles?
Well, I think one of the best designs out there that it's not necessarily the most immediate wow effect, but I think from a designer's point of view, it's a really, really good design, is the current Porsche 911.
Mm-hmm.
I think the proportions, the sculpture, the simplicity, the size of the graphics is pretty perfectly done for that type of vehicle, and it's perfectly fits what a Porsche is, in my view. So that would be one current one. It is more difficult to actually find a current vehicle that I really like. It's always easier to go back to the 60s of the Ferrari 275 GTB and all that, because that was the time when there wasn't so many limitations. But I think the Porsche has done a good job today. There is a few other vehicles out there that I think have some good design elements, but it's hard to pinpoint any others that I think are truly brilliant at the moment, to be quite honest.
And the thing about Porsche too, Henrik, is that it's just evolutionary. I mean, you can go back 20 or 30 years to a 911 and taken from a certain glance, it looks like it's an identical vehicle, except for those evolutionary aspects that have been folded into the new model. Correct? So they hit on something 50 years ago, and it's just been an evolution of that.
It's correct. Look, it's not, of course, a super innovative design in that sense, but it's, I think, a really good design, and I really love looking at it because you can discover something new on the reflections of that vehicle every time you see it. And I think that is, in the essence, a really good design, and it will be timeless. But then, of course, you can also look at, is there some designs where you really look at them and go, wow, they're totally different, but they may not last as long. So that, of course, there's designs like that as well out there where you can say, hey, they're kind of cool because you notice them.
When we look at the classic events, the concours events that occur every year, and the celebration of design to some extent, what is your thinking that, if you project forward, what does a concours look like 30 years from now if today's cars are the cars that we're saying will end up on the 18th fairway of Pebble Beach?
I think it's going to take about 5 minutes to go through the concours.
Or we'll still be looking at the cars from the 1920s.
That's one of the 60s probably.
Or 60s.
Yeah, I think that it's difficult because, like I said, I mean, for example, when I look at supercars today versus supercars in the 60s, it's almost like there is a saturation of mid-engine cars that all seems to have the same proportion. And I think that as an industry, we are a little stuck. I think actually where the most innovation is happening is in SUVs and pickup trucks, quite frankly. And
so it'll be a Pebble Beach of pickup trucks.
I think that's totally doable. Look, my personal opinion is that the pickup truck in the US, which of course is the main market, will actually replace today's muscle car coupe. That's my opinion.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, especially with some of the electric advances that are coming.
Look, I think that's one. I think the other thing that's going to be interesting to see is who is going to be the first to do something about urban mobility and how we sell mobility to the next generation of buyers. And of course, we're working on a program like that. And I think that if we can inject excitement in design, because that has lacked. Whenever you look at a city car, they always kind of are terrible, and they always look super cheap, and they're always like, yeah, don't really want that unless I have to. So I think it's a huge market opportunity, and that's something we want to attack, quite frankly. I think there's a huge opportunity there because the competition is really not great.
So you'll go into that area as well.
Yeah, with a program pair, we are planning and building that with Foxconn. We're planning a vehicle that will start at $29,900, and it's radical. I've already signed off the design, and it's so radical that I'm even uncomfortable with it.
Wow. And this is, for those who haven't heard of PEAR, Personal Electric Automotive Revolution. And you've said before, you're going to enter many different segments, and every car that you're going to bring out will be in a different segment and a different body style. There's an ambitious plan here to really grow this car company, right, Henrik?
Yeah, I think that the only reason for us to even be relevant and be here is if we can do something truly revolutionary and different. I think the Ocean, when you look at that, we have some amazing features, whether it's a solar roof, rotating screen, California mode, and all that. And it's when you see it in reality, it really stands out in a unique proportion. But as we move into the other segments, we'll go even more radical because we are up and running and we're ready. And I think the PEAR, that car will be, or that I actually don't even want to call it a car, I want to call it a mobility device. That mobility device will be extreme. It'll be like some sort of little spaceship that looks really cool. The proportions is funky, but cool. And I think people are going to love it. And it's got a lot of unique features. That's one segment. I also want to do a supercar, quite frankly. But I don't want to do just another mid-engine vehicle. It has to be something that doesn't even exist in terms of a body style. And we're working on it right now. I think we got something. And I think it could be a big surprise, and I think it could open up a new segment. So that's another vehicle we're working on. And then the fourth vehicle, we want to come with four vehicles before 25. We haven't really announced much about it yet. But the reason we want to come out so quickly with vehicles is because I believe the opportunity is now. It's before 2025. And there's two things that's going to, I think, decide how much market share you can take until 25. One is going to be, do you have the right desirable product in the right market segment that people love and want? And the second is, do you have the manufacturing capacity to supply that demand?
Could the fourth vehicle be a pickup truck?
It could be anything.
When you look at success, and you mentioned manufacturing, success also comes in viable partnerships as well. Have you been approached by any legacy automaker to partner with them?
Well, we're public companies. I got to be careful what I say, but I would say generally we're talking to a lot of OEMs. I think what's happening in the world now is that the large OEMs are taking several of the startups very seriously because they've already shown success, or they've shown that there is demand for the vehicles. They've shown that, there's a generation of buyers that are super excited about buying a vehicle from a new startup. And of course, as a startup, we're able to do things much faster and sometimes even take a little more risk and therefore be more innovative than a traditional car company. So there's definitely some synergies there. Of course, they have the ability to scale quick. They have access to certain areas of a large supply chain. So there's a lot of things where you could see commonalities, and there's definitely a much more openness in the entire automotive world to talk together about what we can do together. And I think a second point that drives this is, as everybody realizes, as we move to electrification, the traditional differentiators are falling away. So for example, in the past, everybody wanted to make their own gasoline engine because it was a differentiator. Well, electric motor, they all sound the same. There is no different. They're all full of torque. So do you really, everybody needs to make their own electric motor? Probably not. Battery cells, everybody's buying battery cells from somebody or licensing technology from somebody. So again, I don't think the customer cares what battery cells in the car as long as they're safe and give you a great range. So there's a lot of things right now in the automotive industry where what's more important is getting volume and partner with the right players to get the right technology to market the fastest. So that has kind of definitely opened up opportunities for collaboration.
How many other designers have been successful in launching their own companies?
I have no clue. I know a lot of people have not been successful, whether they were designers, engineers, or whatever they were. If you look at, there really hasn't been any new car company launched until, Tesla obviously are the one here now standing here. And then there's obviously the handful of the startups here in the US. And then of course, there's endless amount of Chinese companies. My view is that by 2025 is kind of judgment day. That is when you will see who continues past 2025 and who don't.
Were a lot of critics about Tesla 10 years ago. What's your, and of course those critics have changed their tune. What is your assessment of Tesla today?
I think the assessment is, I think what everybody can see is they're extremely successful. And, I was watching every year people, of course, saying next year they're going to go bankrupt because now there's going to come out an amazing car from a traditional car maker, and it never happened. Still hasn't happened. So I think that today they have shown that anything is possible. They have shown that there is nothing that's ever going to be the same again in the car industry. I think they have shown that there's a possibility that some of the world's most successful car companies in maybe 5 or 7 years are not going to come, or not going to be any of the traditional car companies. And I think that's essentially what Wall Street are betting on, that we could have such a major seismic shift. And it's not just about, like I said earlier, about who has how many products. It's about who has the right products and who can entice the customer to get those products. And clearly Tesla have shown that despite quality issues and service issues and all the other things, that people are still buying the cars and they still get the highest consumer ratings. And then you can argue everything you want, but that's just reality.
It's just the creation of a certain cult following, isn't it? There's just a passion around the brand name.
I don't know. Like, think about your smartphone. I don't know about you, but mine freezes at least once every second day. And if that was my car, I would probably kick it out and get another one. So, but I don't do it with my smartphone. So I think there's a whole new sentiment around products and about now getting into automobiles and when they're electric. I think people are less sensitive to certain things that was important 10 years ago for customers. Of course, we don't want our vehicles to break down and leave us stranded, but there might be certain things that are not so important anymore for people that we thought was important. So that's something you have to take into consideration. Eventually also, as we move into electrification and get more mature suppliers in every area of that supply chain, I don't think you're going to see a big differentiation between quality of different cars. We have seen it a little bit now, but I think it'll all even out. And I think that's not going to be a differentiator for your car. I think what's going to be a differentiator is the product itself and its attributes.
Sure. Let's talk about just a couple final things. Your ultimate ambitions, Henrik. What are your ultimate ambitions?
Well, I just love getting cars on the road. That's what I love. Every time I create a car and is on the road, I love it. Would I like to be a $2 trillion company? Of course, that would be great. But it cannot be the fundamental driver. The driver has to be creating the most amazing product in the world. And my ambition is to be able to deliver products that really, really excites people, that they really want to own them or buy them or flexible lease them from us, whatever you want to call it. And I got so many ideas. We got so many creative people here. And my ultimate ambition is that we get as many vehicles on the road as possible. And hopefully one day we'll make millions of vehicles. And that's what excites me every day going to work, just working on these different innovative projects.
And why will it work this time?
I don't think anybody has an answer or guarantee, specifically not in the automotive segment. in the end of the day, only time will tell. And I think that we have had a great support from our investors that believe in our business model, which are very unique, much less, I would say much less capital intensive than if you try to do everything yourself in the beginning. I think we got some amazing partners that already are making high quality cars. And I think that's a big differentiator.
Does the Maserati that still lives in your mind, is that what drives you every day? I know you still sketch, right?
Oh, I sketch every day. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think that, I still have affection for some of those cars that I remember when I was young, Lamborghini Countach, Maserati Bora. One of my favorite American cars is the 1979 Pontiac Trans Am.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Love that car. And I'm going to get one of these days.
Smokey and the Bandit.
Smoking in the Band. But it's going to be that last one where the square headlamps were flush. You didn't have the openings. So it's kind of the 1980 model. Black with the golden chicken on and snowflake wheels. And I'm going to probably get one and electrify it. I think that'll be really cool. I just love the shapes of these cars. I love the shapes of, when I see a Dodge Charger with a wide body on it today, I still love it and wish it was electric. But, I still get excited about seeing muscle, seeing beautiful shapes. That will never go away. Maybe that's still the boy in me, but I just love that.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, the boy in you is creating all kinds of dreams for many boys who are out there currently right now. Henrik Fisker, thank you so much for being on the program, for expounding on cars and culture, indeed, because you've driven a lot of cultural changes through the years, and we look forward to the ones that are to come.
Great to see you, Jason. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Henrik.
The automobile is one of the most important inventions that revolutionized the modern world. In America, the rich history of car culture runs deep as technology continues to shape the future of the industry. Jason Stein,
former publisher of Automotive News,
is here to share the stories of people passionate about cars, from industry leaders and innovators to car-obsessed celebrities. Buckle up as Jason takes you inside the boardroom, onto the track, and around the bend on Cars and Culture on SiriusXM Business Radio.